Have you ever thought about how much weight a single word can carry? Like how one word, just a few syllables, can be packed with so much history and meaning. It's honestly kind of wild when you stop and think about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. That word for you today, Trump.
Ooh, that's a loaded one.
I know, right? But hold on to your hats because the research we dug up for this deep dive is fascinating. It traces the entire history of the Trump name going way, way back, like centuries back.
Wow.
Yeah, we're talking long before the Donald ever hit the scene.
I had no idea.
Seriously, there are some truly unexpected twists in this story. We're on a mission today to uncover how this word went from, get this, having a surprisingly positive vibe to the complex and, yeah, often controversial term it is now. You ready to connect the dots from a 16th century card game all the way to modern day politics and culture?
I am so ready. Let's do this.
Okay, so first things first. Picture this. It's the 1500s, and the word Trump is just entering the English language. And here's the kicker. It's directly related to, wait for it, triumph. Yep. Like victory, success, the whole shebang. You see, back then, Trump first popped up in card games. Think of those classic games like Whist or Bridge. You know, the ones your grandparents might still play.
Oh, I think I see where this is going.
Exactly. It referred to a card that basically ruled the game, the ultimate power move. The one card that could beat anything else.
Like the ace up your sleeve.
More like the ace that is your sleeve, you know what I mean? It was the guaranteed winner in that hand no matter what. So naturally, the verb to trump came from that, and it meant, you guessed it, to outdo someone, to come out on top, to basically be better than everyone else. For centuries, that was the core meaning of trump, victory, pure and simple.
Huh. It's so different from how we use it now.
Isn't it mind-blowing? I mean, think about it. This word that's now like the center of all this political and cultural, well, let's just say debate, started out as this positive, good vibes word in a friendly card game. It was the card you actually wanted to have.
Like a complete 180?
Total 180. So imagine those old school card games. You've got that trump card in your hand and boom, the entire game changes. You have the upper hand. You're in control. That feeling of advantage, that's the key to understanding the word's original mojo.
That makes so much sense. Like it had this inherent power that was seen as a good thing.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's jump across the pond and fast forward a few centuries. We're landing in America, where the story of the Trump dynasty, as our source material calls it, all begins. Enter Frederick Trump, Donald Trump's grandfather.
Oh, the OG Trump.
Right. So Frederick was a German immigrant, and he was chasing that American dream during the Yukon Gold Rush. Now, a lot of the stories you hear about Donald Trump emphasize this straight shot to entrepreneurial success, like it was destiny or something.
Yeah, like a self-made man narrative.
Yeah, totally. But when you dig into the details about Frederick's early businesses, it's a little more, shall we say, nuanced. He was running restaurants and hotels, which sounds pretty standard, but there are hints in our research that some of these establishments, well, let's just say they might have been offering some extracurricular activities on the side.
Interesting. So not exactly squeaky clean from the start.
Right. And it's interesting because even in these early days, you see that connection between the Trump name and this push to succeed, even if it means bending the rules a bit. Does that sound familiar?
It definitely seems to be a recurring theme.
It really does. Oh, and get this. After his Yukon adventures, Frederick actually headed back to Germany. But there's a twist. He got deported because he skipped out on his mandatory military service.
Oh, wow. You know that.
Yeah. So he ends up back in New York, settling in Queens. It just shows that the whole American dream story of the Trumps, it's not quite as straightforward as some people might think. It's more of a winding road, you know?
Definitely more complicated than the myth.
Way more complicated. All right, next up. Fred Trump, Donald's dad. This is where the real estate empire really takes off. Fred was a whole different kind of operator. Our sources describe him as incredibly sharp and disciplined. He was a real estate developer who knew how to play the game, especially during the housing boom after World War II, and he built a ton of middle-class housing in places like Queens and Brooklyn.
So he was more as a builder, less of the showman?
Exactly. And he was a master at working those government programs like FHA loans. He knew how to use the system to his advantage, sometimes pretty aggressively, according to our sources. It's during this time that the Trump name really starts getting tangled up in some controversy, too.
Right. Wasn't there a lawsuit?
You got it. In 1973, the Justice Department slapped them with a lawsuit alleging that they were discriminating against renters based on race. And both Fred and a young Donald Trump were named in it. This is a pretty big deal because it shows a pattern that pops up again and again with the Trumps. Legal trouble, accusations of unfair practices, you name it. Our research really digs into Fred's frugality, his calculated approach to business, and how all of that deeply influenced Donald's views on money and power. It wasn't just about the buildings, it was about a whole way of doing business that got passed down.
Interesting. So while Fred was more low-key, behind the scenes, those early business practices kind of set the stage for what the Trump brand would become. This drive for expansion, pushing boundaries, not always playing by the rules.
Yeah, totally. And it's a stark contrast to Fred's style, right? Fred was all quiet, under the radar. But his son, well, we all know Donald's not exactly known for being low-key.
That's an understatement.
Now, let's jump to Donald Trump himself. The man, the myth, the brand. Born in Queens in 1946, he grew up pretty privileged. But here's the thing. Our sources point out that he had this deep craving for something more. He wanted recognition. He wanted to be on top. And he wasn't going to settle for just being another rich kid from Queens.
So he always wanted to be in the spotlight.
Always. He went to Wharton, which is a big deal, of course, but he quickly ditched his dad's more traditional focus on middle-class housing and set his sights on the glitzy world of Manhattan real estate. It was all about making a splash, being in the center of everything.
That's where Trump Tower comes in.
That's it. The 1970s and 80s were Donald's time to shine. He built Trump Tower, jumped into the casino business, and it wasn't just about the businesses themselves. He was building a brand. Everything was about creating this image of Trump as the ultimate winner, the symbol of success and luxury.
So he was very conscious of how he was crafting his image.
Oh, absolutely. He was a master at self-promotion. He was building his persona as much as he was building buildings. And then, boom, 1987, The Art of the Deal hits the shelves. This book basically became his gospel.
Yeah, I remember that book. It was everywhere.
Everywhere. Our sources remind us that it was actually ghostwritten, but man, did it ever cement the myth of Donald Trump as this business genius. It was like his personal brand Bible. And here's the kicker. Fast forward to the 2000s, The Apprentice takes over TV. You're fired becomes the catchphrase everyone's using. And what's wild is that all this was happening while his businesses were actually facing some major issues behind the scenes. Our sources point out that there were bankruptcies, huge debts. Things weren't as rosy as they seemed.
So the image and the reality were totally different.
Totally different. It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. Here he is, this larger-than-life boss figure on TV, firing people left and right, and people ate it up. They loved that image of him as the strong, decisive leader. But behind the curtain, things were far from perfect. It really shows you the power of image, doesn't it?
The power of branding, for sure.
Now, buckle up, because we're heading into part 4, the cracks in the empire. This is where that shiny image starts to crack, and the reality starts to seep through. Our sources list a whole bunch of business failures. The Atlantic City bankruptcies were huge. Then there was Trump Airlines, Trump University, which, by the way, ended up in a lawsuit and a settlement. Trump Steaks, Trump Vodka. I mean, seriously, the list goes on and on.
It's like he tried his hand at everything.
He did, and not all of it worked out, to say the least. But what's interesting is how he handled these failures, at least in the public eye. He often managed to spin things in his favor, deflect blame, and come out looking, well, not exactly unscathed, but definitely better than you'd expect. He was a master at using debt and manipulating the media.
And then, out of nowhere, the political rise. 2016, the election that shook everything up. Our sources say even a lot of his supporters were surprised by the outcome.
I think everyone was surprised by that one.
Yeah, it really did come out of left field. But for his base, he was the ultimate outsider. The businessman who could go to Washington and drain the swamp, so to speak. The one who wasn't afraid to break the rules and shake things up. And that message resonated with a lot of people, especially those who felt like the system wasn't working for them anymore.
Right. And his presidency, let's just say it was a wild ride. Our sources present a pretty neutral view, but even they can't deny how divisive he was. Some people loved his policies, especially his economic policies before COVID hit and his tough stance on immigration. But others were deeply concerned by his leadership style, what they saw as authoritarian tendencies, his handling of the pandemic, the fact that he alienated a lot of our allies, and, of course, the whole January 6th situation. It was a roller coaster, to put it mildly.
Roller coaster's putting it lightly.
Yeah.
But one thing that stayed consistent throughout was the cult of personality surrounding him.
Definitely. His supporters saw him as a fighter, someone who stood up to the establishment, the elites, the whole political correctness culture. They loved that he didn't sugarcoat things and said what he thought, even if it was offensive or inflammatory.
To them, he was authentic.
Exactly. And on the flip side, his detractors saw him as a dangerous demagogue, someone who is eroding democratic norms and values. They saw his business history, all the failures and controversies, and questioned how someone with that kind of track record could be trusted with so much power.
So we're left with this question. What were people really supporting? Was it just the image, the brand, or was it something deeper? Because despite the image of success he projected, the reality was a lot more complicated.
Right. It's this disconnect between the carefully constructed image and the actual record. And that brings us to part 5, the legacy. What happens to the name Trump now? Our sources suggest that the name has basically become a political litmus test. For conservatives, it's still a rallying cry. For liberals, it's often a symbol of everything they oppose.
Yeah, it's like shorthand for a whole set of values and beliefs.
Exactly. And the brand that was once synonymous with luxury and success, now it's linked to controversy, nationalism, division. It's a far cry from those early days of card games and simple victory.
It's fascinating how much the meaning has shifted.
Right. And our sources go even further. They talk about how the name might continue to evolve, especially among younger generations. They're the ones who have only really known Trump in this supercharged political context. And for them, it might not carry the same weight. It might even become a term with negative connotations. Like, imagine getting trumped, meaning being lied to or tricked, or Trump logic, meaning spouting nonsense.
That would be quite a shift.
It would be. And there are already signs that the brand is losing its luster. Some properties have ditched the Trump name. Businesses and charities are distancing themselves. It seems like even in the business world, the name isn't the golden ticket it once was.
But it's important to remember that he still has a lot of supporters. People who believe in him, who felt like he was the only one fighting for them. Our sources emphasize that a big part of his base was driven by real frustration with the political system, economic anxiety, feeling like they were being ignored by the establishment. They saw Trump as someone who understood their struggles, who wasn't afraid to call out the elites and challenge the status quo.
And that's where this idea of confidence versus competence comes into play. Our sources suggest that some of his supporters might have been so drawn to his confidence, his swagger, that they overlooked or downplayed his actual competence. He talked a big game, and people believed him, even when the results didn't match the promises.
He was a master salesman, that's for sure. But was he actually a good leader? That's a whole other question.
It is, and our sources point to a lot of examples where that confidence might have been misplaced, like the border wall, which never really got built the way he promised, the Trump University settlement, which acknowledged that they were misleading students, the whole COVID-19 response, which was, well, let's just say controversial, the tax cuts that mainly benefited the wealthy, and the numerous questionable appointments within his administration. It's a pattern of big promises and not always delivering.
So at the end of the day, what's the takeaway? We started with this simple word, Trump, meaning victory in a card game. Then it became a family name tied to ambition and wealth. And now it's become this massive cultural symbol wrapped up in controversy, division, and for many, disillusionment. It's like the word itself has taken on all the baggage of the Trump presidency.
It's kind of a wild journey, isn't it? From representing a sure win to becoming a symbol of, well, something a lot more complicated.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the word itself. It's about how we view success, leadership, power, and how easily we can be swayed by image and branding. It really makes you think about how language can be used and manipulated, and how history gets written or rewritten.
So here's one last thought to chew on. What does the changing meaning of Trump tell us about how we define success and leadership today? And what will this whole cultural and linguistic shift mean for the future? It's something to think about.
Definitely. It's a question we all need to grapple with, because ultimately it's not just about one word or one family. It's about the stories we tell ourselves, the values we hold, and the kind of world we want to create.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, folks.
Until next time.